Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, October 31st, 2025, which is Friday the 13th, backwards, fitting for Halloween and the opposite day. Take your pick. Today, we are talking about how the cost of the future is farmland, talking about storing water in dry, cold climates, and it is Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and happy Halloween. I hope you all are doing well. I know for many of you, the harvests have slowed down, but for everyone harvesting in your werewolf costumes out in the cold and or wet this week, big salute to you. It's still cold and wet here, and I'm assuming it's cold and wet where you are. And I'm just doing, the little cleanup things, nothing super exciting. However, what is exciting is that I saw that our friend Jane Murner has a new season of the Composter podcast coming out next week. If you are not subscribed to that, I will link it in the show notes for you, or Mike will. Love Jane's work and cannot wait for that. If you have any interest in the composting business, that is the go-to source. Anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about AI and the future of content creation, plus conventional farming and productivity. Normal Monday stuff. I appreciated this from @BillPrice4209, who wrote, quote, "Fair take on conventional ag, Jesse. It's nice to hear a reasonable take on the subject instead of the usual ranting screed of condemnation. We'll never solve any of the problems facing us if all we do is lecture and demean one another. You demonstrate a good model of how to have discourse without alienating others. Thank you," end quote. Thank you, Bill. And I don't know that I always accomplish that, but I do feel as a culture right now, many of us, including myself, are somewhat starved of fair-minded, reflective, humanizing takes on the world's problems that actually look at the whole of the issue. Again, not pretending I'm perfect at that even a little bit, but I think we all need to try and respect that there are other normal, intelligent, humans on both sides of everything. And the physics of a divided society is such that until we see those people, they won't be able to see us, whoever us may be. Also, lots of good comments on the AI stuff that day. I think this one from @NathanChristopher8585 sums it up pretty well. Quote, "Former AI engineer turned farmer here. Am I being too hard on AI?" That's in quotations. That's something I said. No, definitely not. I would go as far as to say that you are not being hard enough on it. AI will upend huge portions of our society in the years to come, and who benefits from the changes matters deeply. Will it benefit all of us? Let us all work fewer hours, have better lives, more time with our families, better access to healthcare, a healthier environment. Or will it just make the richest and most powerful entities in history, modern corporations, vastly more wealthy and powerful, all while invading our privacy, stealing art from artists, providing scammers with powerful new tools, polluting the environment at a prodigious rate, eroding the institutions which bolster and protect the common folk, and a dizzying array of other life-altering disturbances? If we don't actively choose the former, then it will be the latter. I am deeply worried about our collective future," end quote. I don't know, nothing more to add to that, except, yep. You're here. On Tuesday, we talked about leaves and fire separately. @NickZivs wrote, quote, "The 2024 growing season here in Southern Ontario was something else. Everything was, I want to say, 2 to 3 weeks behind at very least going into July, and the temperatures we experienced during the heaviest time of smoke in June were at the very least 5 degrees Celsius below seasonal. The quick bolt spring crops loved it, though. It basically extended spring. I had low heat tolerant heads of lettuce that persisted until August that year," end quote. Thanks. And yeah, this is the confounding nature of smoke, but also the somewhat benefits of diversification, I guess you could say. If you grow, a few crops, the conditions better be perfect, especially if you focused heavily on your summer crops in this situation. If you grow a bunch of different crops, something is likely to succeed, if not thrive, even in a smoky year. Also that day, @60oldmangrowing asked, quote, "Why not bring back controlled burn? This is the problem for so many wildfires because it's not done like it used to be, from my understanding. Thanks, like your podcast to learn a lot," end quote. Thank you. And well, controlled burns are a thing that is being used and having more and more of a resurgence. The challenge, however, with widespread adoption of controlled burns is that we have not set up this world to live around regular small fires. Neighborhoods and farms would and have burned. That has happened, unfortunately, from controlled burns because, well, it's similar to the beaver issue. We can't just let beavers thrive because we have built neighborhoods and whole cities and roads and businesses and places that beaver ponds would effectively flood. Ditto fire. We haven't constructed the modern world for fire, so it's quite vulnerable to fire. We have chosen humans to try to live outside of nature or try to control it, and we're all, I think, collectively realizing, oops, that may have not been a great idea, because there are no good, natural, even beneficial ways on a larger scale to manage wildfires or water anymore. Change would require significant alterations to building codes and land usage, plus significantly more money poured into fire and water mitigation strategies, which starts with people like us caring about these things and making them, issues or priorities so that politicians will actually care about them and act on them. But I don't think all hope is lost. I mean, we could slowly create that world. But yeah, take some will. On Wednesday, we talked about a bunch of stuff because I went live, which is always a super fun day. That day, I briefly discussed deforestation in the Amazon and how that is or could lead to massive desertification in that area, basically Brazil and that area becoming a desert. At Ecotones Pod wrote, quote, "The part about losing trees in the Amazon contributing to decline in rainfall averages and ultimately contributing to desertification is something I would absolutely love to hear more about. I've heard this concept touched on before, but it feels like such an insane phenomenon and also completely makes sense," end quote. Indeed, it is certainly something worthy of its own segment or 10 segments because similar things are and have happened all over the world. But basically, the way the Amazon works in terms of like rainfall is that it is a rainforest, not because it happens to rain a lot in that region, but because the dense native trees are pumping so much water into the atmosphere, respired from their leaves through evapotranspiration, that it collects above the canopy in a rich, humid atmospheric river that then drops back into the forest to embarrassingly oversimplify that science. However, at a certain point, enough of the forest is lost that this system will no longer function. Like, it's sort of like cutting off a river in huge sections, so it's no longer connected. It's no longer a full river. When that happens, huge portions of the forest will die off, and some research has suggested the river will not be reparable. Basically, we don't need the entire forest to be cut down to lose the entire forest. Once we lose a certain percentage of those forests, primarily to soybeans and beef production, we risk losing all of those forests, and that percentage of deforestation needed to trigger the collapse could be as low as like 25%. It's getting pretty close to that now, estimated in the, like the high teens of deforestation right now. And it's really hard to say what the global atmospheric repercussions of that will be, considering what a huge effect the Amazon has on cooling the planet currently. Trees are awesome at cooling stuff. That's the scientific term, awesome. On managing water cycles, on cleaning our air, giving us oxygen, all the things. So yeah, that many trees all in one place is incredibly important to us. 2050 is the current year. Some researchers at least expect this, like a deforestation trigger to happen based on current deforestation rates, give or take. So yeah, maybe more on that later because there are a lot of people doing great work to try and fight that, but they need our support, both financially and just like publicly. Anyway, hopefully we talked about something a little cheerier on Thursday. On Thursday, we talked about soil testing and microplastics. So a bit of a mixed bag on the cheery front, but at Rich M, wrote on the soil test front, quote, "Yes, let's hear it for Ward Labs for soil testing. I believe I got that from you, Jesse. You fill out their questionnaire completely and provide soil samples the way they describe, and what they give you back is pretty astounding. Meanwhile, my incredibly underfunded and overworked state extension service was so inundated they couldn't even give a time when they could get the report back. That's not as much help when I want to plant. Ward Labs emailed me the complete report in less than a week," end quote. Thanks. And yeah, that can be an issue sometimes too, because you just have a lot of growers in the spring taking their samples to your extension offices. So yeah, they get backed up. I like Ward Labs a lot as well. And that Haney test that we've talked about before on the show, it's much more, biological in nature. What I kind of settled on as an approach in using the BCSR types that I described this week to start a garden, and then using something like the Haney test to monitor the soil health and the production and all those things. But you could just start with a more biological test like those from Ward Labs and then just go from there and just use that as your only test. No issues there necessarily. I guess I just kind of got in the habit of the other one. But again, if I have an extension agent listening, you are appreciated. The soil testing does just leave a little bit to be desired for us soil health nerds. Anyway, great stuff as always, commenters. You all are the best. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, collecting water in a cold climate, BRB. BRB. Happy Halloween. Solid. Nailed it. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Chad Hayes, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I'm starting a market garden on 2 acres in southern Manitoba, zone 4A. It will be entirely off-grid, at least for the first year. I'm planning to power it with solar and irrigate primarily with rainwater. Hauling water is an option, but I would prefer to reserve that for particularly dry stretches. We average about 3 inches of rain per month in summer. I think I have sufficient rain collection surfaces, but need a way to store it. I was planning a system of clean IBC totes, painted black and stored in an unheated greenhouse to act as thermal mass and to maintain liquid water for as long as possible. But now I'm considering digging a pond inside the greenhouse to serve the same functions. I would need some type of diversion system to avoid flooding, would probably use outdoor IBC totes as an intermediary and then pump/drain it into the pond. I can also see humidity being a potential issue, but I've seen aquaponic systems with large open tanks in a greenhouse, and this seems similar. Any thoughts as to a reasonable amount of rainwater storage per 100-foot bed or similar standardized unit? And or storing it in a greenhouse pond versus containers. Thanks so much for the work you do and the way you do it," end quote. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so this is an interesting question, especially because part of the issue you have with water is that you're in a dry climate. But the other part is that you're in a cold climate as well. So freezing water tanks could be an issue at times, and that obviously has to be worked out. Now, the first thing I would probably say is that, as you alluded to, open tanks of water in high tunnel is tricky for the humidity reason, but also just for the amount of space it would take up that you would no longer be able to use for production. Plus, as you also suggest, you would need to engineer some way to manage the excess, which could require a decent amount of work and money. Aquaponics operations, the productive ones anyway, tend to be highly engineered with heating and ventilation and all the things. For me, I think the large painted totes is probably the best place to start. You will obviously have to be very careful about the systems that you use within those totes in terms of drainage because, you live in an area where even a large tote is capable of freezing. So those spouts where the water comes out need to be themselves pretty protected. If you do put barrels in the tunnel itself, use the northern side of the tunnel, obviously, so as not to block sunlight. The only concern I have with having them inside of the tunnel, beyond, again, the space they will take from your production, unless you're using it more like a greenhouse, and doing starts or whatever, in which case you could use the top of the barrels for setting your trays. Anyway, the only concern I have is how cold they may keep the tunnel in the spring. I've talked about this before, provided they still have water in them in the spring. In my experience, the experience of several other growers I've spoken with, the thermal mass actually makes it a little bit difficult to warm the tunnel in the spring. That doesn't mean certain growers in certain areas won't benefit, and even for us, most years it worked out, fine. But after cold or cloudy winters, it was quite cold in our tunnel headed into March, which slowed down our production. The same would probably be said of the pond idea. It's a big thermal mass, for better or worse. Maybe you drain them, the pond or the tanks or whatever, in the spring as you're watering, and then refill them as the rains come for use in the summer, which could reduce the cold thermal mass issue if they're empty. That could totally work out. Pun not intended, but also not avoided. So take that as you will. As for the amount of water you need per bed, you need at very least half a gallon of water per square foot per watering. But that's a bit on the conservative side and doesn't really account for, like how you're watering. If you're watering with drip line using pulse watering techniques, for instance, you could really stretch that amount. Mulches and good soil practices will also help to retain the water so you don't need quite as much per watering. Overhead watering with a pump or a hose, and you'd need probably more water than, just that half gallon per square foot. Anyway, I don't think I have much more to add to that, but people in cold, drier climates can feel free to add their insight. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break and then talk about why farming doesn't fit into our world's current vision of the future. Be right back to the future and then back. Today's episode is brought to you by Marble Seed. The Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference attracts a wide range of regenerative and organic farmers for 3 days of skill development and community building. Farmer Drew Kramer said, "Going to Marble Seed was so invigorating at a time when I needed it most. I picked up tools I'm already using." The conference is the final week in February in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Early registration opens December 4th at conference.marbleseed.org. That's conference.marbleseed.org. All right, back to the show. All right, so something that's been on my mind over the last little while is the cost of the future is our farmland. And I'm not convinced it's necessarily going to be worth it, if I'm allowed a significant understatement. What I mean is that things like AI and automation are going to ring in a new era. There really is no doubt about that at this point. There is absolutely no political will to regulate or slow down the march of AI, even as we know it will replace untold numbers of jobs. Amazon, the company, for instance, is said to be replacing 500,000 jobs and 14,000 white-collar jobs via AI and automation. Nestle is cutting 16,000 jobs, thanks at least in part to automation and AI, and so on. What this technological boom period will also do is just straight up eat up our land and resources. Internationally, we are already witnessing this. Quoting the New York Times, quote, "In Ireland, data centers consume more than 20% of the country's electricity. In Chile, precious aquifers are in danger of depletion. In South Africa, where blackouts have long been routine, data centers are further taxing the national grid. Similar concerns have surfaced in Brazil, Britain, India, Malaysia, the Netherlands, Singapore, and Spain," end quote. And with those challenges is a mounting opposition to data centers in those countries. At some point, although data centers are already being built here in the US, the need to build more domestically will grow, and with that growth will come all those same problems. And to be clear about that, I'm not suggesting that our power and information needs are better when they affect other countries. That's a very sad way of living in the world. You know, if we wouldn't want a data center in our own backyard, we should not use these technologies, period. Data centers need land. Farms, forests, and the like lose out because of that. We're seeing this play out in rural communities all over the country right now, Michigan, Virginia, Texas, and so on. Cheap rural land is being bought up for data center construction. No doubt a giant energy-sucking building, often requiring dozens, even up to hundreds of acres of land each, helping people with their shopping lists, and so that they can put themselves in funny situations on Sora was top among all of our visions of pastoral life when we decided to start farms and move to the country. Now, on the automation front, which needs fewer centralized data centers, obviously, comes the manufacturing side of the coin. With more emphasis on bringing manufacturing back to the US comes the part that goes unsaid, that manufacturing plants are huge energy-intensive waste-creating entities that need loads of farmland and are increasingly becoming automated, so they don't even really come with the promise of that many jobs. Can they be built in existing buildings and developed areas? Well, sure, they could be, and that would probably be great, but they won't be. It's often more expensive to retrofit existing infrastructure and to buy the land beneath it. Plus, building exactly what the company wants means you can engineer it to be incredibly efficient. For robots, or whatever the term you prefer for automated machines. I don't have an answer beyond the fact that we need a massive political backlash against automation and AI and manufacturing, as well as a rejection of excessive consumerism. Obviously, I think that would help. But I do think it's important that we all take a step back from time to time and ask ourselves not only if this is the future we want, but if so, is it worth the cost? Because the cost of this particular future is farms, farmland, forests, water, beauty, health, all those things. So anyway, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think there is a good percentage of people who are less than interested in AI and the effects it will have on society, let alone the environment. But it just needs more vocalization and public rejection. AI and automation have a place, sure, a potential. They could help solve significant issues within health, within diseases, within all sorts of sciences, but we don't need AI just generating arts, movies, shopping lists, booking our reservations for us, answering any and every question we have without any work on our end. It's not worth our environment. It's not worth the cost to our creativity and our culture. It's definitely not worth our farmland. Anyway, feel free to disagree or agree, or just agree all you want. It's Halloween. What other day could we agree more? Otherwise, that's it for this horror story, and we're going to leave Friday to rest in peace. See all the Halloween puns I did there? It was fun. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Great tune, whatever it is. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where, at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, well, actually, the month of November, it starts next week, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Kyle Richardville, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, Chris Yates, and Ian at Grindstone Farms. Big shouts to you all. You all have been longtime supporters, and we really, really appreciate it. All right, and continuing our story from Monday, thanks to our amazing Patreon members, you will remember that we had our shy, only child, slightly small, Anne, who was always, just quite quiet, but, also quite content, like never really needed much. She had a very active imagination, and she could slip into that imagination so intensely that it would be hard, it could be hard to bring her out of it. She was just kind of in the zone, as you would say. Anyway, one day, Anne found a small clown costume in her mom's old toy chest and took it out. It had, the red nose and the big wig and the suspenders and like the whole thing. It was the whole getup, but it was kind of like older, kind of tattered and that sort of stuff. And so Anne decided she was a circus clown, obviously, complete with her own makeup, which she masterfully applied using a single lipstick tube that she stole from her mom. And so vintage clown suit, wig, nose, and all, she decided to go out and find her escaped elephants and tigers in her imagination, right? Where else would they be, right? But at the zoo. So Anne marched out onto the street to walk to the park and find her escaped animals. And inside of Anne's head, this was fun and exciting adventure. But as the local news would later report, a small, unreceptive little clown was seen terrifying the dogs and chasing them around the dog park before disappearing into a thick brush, or as Anne would describe it, the circus tent. Anyway, a tiny clown chasing dogs. It's horrifying. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. Happy Halloween, everyone. Hope you all have a great weekend. We will see you Monday. Bye.